It's the year 2000. You've survived Y2K. And imagine you've bought yourself a new phone to celebrate. The Siemens SL45. Sleek and beautiful like a sports car. The digital Millennium has brought many new things, including something called Napster. So you download an MP3 of your favourite 90s hit over your 56K modem, and it only takes 20 minutes to download one song. You then copy this copyright-breaking MP3 to the 32 megabyte MMC or multimedia card that came with your Siemens SL45. This is not the first phone to have an MMC slot. That was the Nokia 9110. But it might just be the second ever phone to have one. And now you're living in the future. This is the first phone to ever feature MP3 playback. With this memory card that was included, this phone could hold an entire album of music, a whopping 8 to 10 songs. The only limitation is the Siemens supplied headphones that plug directly into the charging port. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get these headphones when I got this phone, so please bear with me as I demonstrate how this phone looks when it's playing an MP3. The Siemens SL45 is a beautiful phone with an absolutely gorgeous orange backlight LCD. It's big and bright and really complements the style of the phone. If you turn on the phone without a SIM card installed, it even gives you access to most of the functions. This is a rarity for phones at this time. But I'm going to be putting in a SIM card because I want to gain access to all of the functions. This really is a full function phone. There's even an organizer section that includes lots of extra functions like a calendar and appointments and a calculator. There's also profiles and everything you would expect from a high-end phone. Here you'll find basic internet. There's the MP3 player. There's also a card explorer for looking through the files on your memory card. And there are some built-in games that I need to have a look at. The first game is Supermind, a very simple mastermind-based guessing game. A good game that doesn't need to be overly complex to enjoy. Next is Move the Box. This is an interesting puzzle game, and exactly the sort of puzzle game that I like to play. I've seen many variations on this sort of game, and this looks like a good one. Another game is Wacko. This is more of a reaction-based whack the rabbits with the keypad sort of game. Not exactly what I'm looking for. The next game is Home Run, a fairly interesting take on a platform-style game. A little bit simple, but I'm glad it's here. There's also a version of Connect 4, a fairly simple game, but a nice inclusion here. And there really are quite a lot of games included in this phone. The final game is The Maze, and this seems to use the same graphics as Home Run. While it looks a bit like Pac-Man, the aim of the game is to get through the maze. Overall, not a bad selection that Siemens included with this phone. But this phone can do so much more. It runs a 16-bit CPU, the 80C166. Now, I don't think this is an ARM-based CPU. It seems to run at about 20 MHz, which is plenty powerful for a phone like this. Though I don't think it's decoding MP3s. I think this phone probably has a dedicated hardware MP3 decoding chip inside. But this CPU is still quite powerful, and I want to find out what it's capable of. Now, I made a mistake in my Beyond the Nokia 3310 video. where I said the Nokia 3410 was the first phone with Java capability and downloadable games. And that wasn't correct, because the successor to this phone, the SL45i, is actually the first phone to have Java capabilities. And when combined with bringing the first MP3 phone to market, with its big, beautiful orange display and its sleek design, Siemens were really smashing it at the time. Unfortunately, I don't have an SL45i to show you, but I do have a copy of the SL45i firmware. And it turns out the i version of this phone uses the exact same hardware as the original. And back in the day, hackers worked out how to rip the firmware from the SL45, and they made tools to enable you to flash this firmware into the original SL45. I'm very keen to see Java running on this phone, so I'm going to attempt to do this upgrade myself. To do this, I'm going to be using my Libretto 100 CT as the host computer. I also have here a Siemens serial data cable, and unlike Nokia or Sony Ericsson or Motorola, you don't need a special flashing cable for this phone. I will be needing a serial port, which is not included by default on the Libretto, so I'll be putting the Libretto into its dock, and this adds a serial port, a parallel port, and even a third PCM-CIA port. I didn't show off the dock in my Libretto 100 CT video, but if you want to see many of the PCM-CIA cards that work on this Libretto, you can check those out in that video. And of course, this laptop runs Windows 98. This provides really good compatibility for many of the tools that I'll be using to upgrade this phone, and I found quite a few tools to test. One really nice looking one is called Freer, and this includes lots of functions for flashing and backing up this phone's firmware. So the first thing I'm going to do is a full backup of everything on this phone, just in case. And straight off the bat, I'm getting quite a lot of read errors trying to read the firmware out of this phone. Even dropping the baud rate down to its minimum 56K, and it's still not going very well. I tried a number of different software programs, and with each one I was having different sorts of problems. But I found with the program KSIE, I was able to drop the speed below 56K. At 38K, I was getting a lot less errors. Eventually I dropped it down to 19.2K, and now the backup seems to be going okay without any errors, though at this speed it did take a while to complete. Everything looks good, and hopefully I've got a clean backup of all the firmware and the settings out of this phone. Okay, it's time to flash some SL45i firmware. And KSIE is telling me it can't flash the firmware. I tried all the different options, but eventually I had to give up and try some other software. I did try Freer again, and the flashing process did start okay. In fact, it ran through the whole process and gave me no errors. But this was perhaps a bit silly after all the errors I had reading from this phone, because after flashing, when I try to turn this phone on, it's now completely unalive. Hopefully I'll be able to recover from this, so it's back to the forums. I really do enjoy exploring these old modding forums. I like reading all the old posts and trying out all the hacker tools that were made at the time. One difficulty is these posts and these tools were made over a long period of time, and it's not always obvious which ones were made later and have better solutions to these sorts of problems. Though we do have new places for sharing, such as Reddit and Discord communities. By the way, this channel has a Discord server, if you want to join and discuss your interests with these sorts of things. So after looking through the archives on some of these classic forums, such as Isato or Howard Forum or GSM Forum, I found a newer version of KSIE, and this version is able to start the flashing process without that initial error. Though I do still need to keep the speed down to 19.2K, but I'm finally able to flash the firmware in this phone. And pressing power and it's starting to turn on again. Though it is saying wrong software on the display and immediately shutting off. This is typically from a checksum mismatch, from flashing software from a phone with a different IMEI number. Fortunately, when I started this process, I also backed up the map file from this phone, which contains all the original settings from the EEPROM in this phone, and I'm hoping that includes the original checksum values. So I just need to upload the original map file and then try turning it on. And there we go, it looks like it's working again. Looking through the menus and in the Surf Fun section, there it is, there's Java. I now have the first mobile Java engine running on my SL45. It's now time to try out some games and some apps on this thing. And there are just so many Java games to choose from. I have tried a few in the past, for example in my Sony Ericsson videos, but those were more modern colour screen phones that tended to work best with later Java apps and games. I also tried a few on the 3410 in a previous Nokia video. This was really hard though, because there's no way to copy Java apps into the Nokia 3410. They can only be installed over the air using the network. Instead, I had to patch Java games directly into the Nokia firmware and then flash the entire firmware each time. The SL45 is much easier. Simply drop apps directly onto the memory card, pop it in the phone and run them. I can now test many more of these early Java apps, but be prepared to find many that don't work. It took some time, but I found a number of really interesting apps. A lot of the ones I found that do start seem to be made for later colour screen phones. Cosmoshot, for example. While I'm impressed by the Java engine in this phone and its ability to render colour graphics, I'm looking for games that work well on this phone. And I am able to find some. Super Marbles, for example. It has title screen music and sound effects, and it plays really well. It's not a bad game, and I kinda like it, but I'm looking for something a bit more involved. Arkanoid, for example, is so slow. The graphics look good, but it's unplayable. There's quite a few games that look like they would be really good, but they're obviously just too slow. So I gotta keep searching. Next is Caveman, and this is fast and responsive. This is a good example of a retro mining game. This just seems to be a demo version of the game though. Fortunately, I found another mining game, Rabbit Hole. This is also nice and responsive and demonstrates that this phone can handle some decent games. I still want more, so I went on the hunt for a good platformer. Of course, I had to try Super Mario Bros. And unfortunately we're back to bad graphics and slow performance. I am curious about this game, so I must try it on a more modern phone one day. I kept exploring games until I eventually found K2. And this is an excellent platformer. It seems to be slightly more step-based than full-on action platformer. But that seems to fit the controls better. And check out that parallax scrolling. This game is awesome, I really like this one. But the most awesome app I found really shows off the power of this phone when optimized for it. Before I show this off, I want to briefly mention there's much more I want to do with this phone, including firmware patching and modding, and even custom ROMs. But that will have to wait for part 2 of this video. But to end part 1, I want to demo something awesome. It's a tech demo of a video player running on this phone. I'll go more into how this works in part 2. Also, being a tech demo, it doesn't include any audio playback, so you'll just have to bear with me as I improvise the outro for you. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. We've known each other for so long, but you've been too shy to say it.